And now, it's my pleasure to introduce a transformational leader with nearly 25 years of experience in strategy development and execution. Currently serving as the Executive General Manager of Strategy and Transformation at Wipro and the co founder of Do. He has spent 15 years in the Middle East advising top executives and driving excellence across industries. With expertise in mergers and acquisitions, technology transformations, and corporate strategy, our speaker brings a wealth of global experience and insights in today's session. Please help me in join in welcoming James Brimm.
I'll, I'll stand over here. Okay.
Podium or
Oh, okay. So it's my intense pleasure to be here with you today. To say the engine room of the future, youth. I almost want to say I'm in the advanced youth members only, so I'm still in this boat with you. But I think the problem statement that we're trying to address today is shaping a sustainable future. So, I wanted to kind of have a principle-driven conversation today, so we could arrive at similar conclusions. Um, Let me take this here. So, what's a principle-driven approach? Well, if I walk it back, maybe a little bit about myself. Thank you for the introduction. Um, I think many of us will have introductions, but it's not what others think we are, it's what we think we are. If I think about brands, if I think about Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Nike, these are brands. Each of you in this room, and I'm speaking directly to the youth, you are a brand. Our family name, the legacy that we live, that we'll leave behind. The last speaker mentioned the first. Imagine a world where there's no more first. The first woman pilot, the first Monty company, the first rapper. I can't be that anymore, but there's always a first. But that white space, that opportunity space for the youth is very vast. It's exciting. So how do we embrace it? So this is the way I see the world. And again, when I'm looking at this problem statement, I think it was given to me the other day. I said, oh, that's big, it's bodacious, right? Shaping the future, wow. I'd unwind it. And so when I unwind problem statements from a strategy standpoint, I start with rationale. What reasons are there? What reasons for the youth to shape this future? Okay? What logic can I apply? What facts can I apply to think about how the youth can shape this future? Before I arrive at the principles, I then said, well, we need to embed some capabilities into this, right? The last gentleman also mentioned questions. Well, if I was asked the room what's more important, a question or an answer, someone may say an answer, but no, a question's more important, right? 1 plus 1 is 2, but in the world of mergers and acquisitions, 1 plus 1 could be 9 energy value. So, questions are more important than answers. We should always question, right? So that's one capability that I want to embed in the conversation today. Thinking picture and pixel, right? The scale of size. Size is irrelevant. An ant is large to an amoeba, but an ant is small to an elephant. So your movement is what you want it to be. And the ability to scale your ideas up and down, picture and pixel is important. Resolutions versus solutions. Often people want a solution. A solution is the what. We jump to the answer. But a resolution is bigger. It's bold. It's a decision to do something. So between these intellectual jousting positions, I then said, well, if I'm going to have this conversation today, I now want to embed some principles to have this conversation, right? So here's where I think, well, I'll tell some stories. Everyone's telling stories, so I might as well follow the trend. I thought about the times in my life where if I wanted to make that change, what was the pivotal moment? So I started with behaviors. And here I think, to give you some examples, I wrestled at Michigan State. And Tom Minkle, who was Olympic coach or wrestled in the Olympics in 1980, he had a system. His system was fatigue will eventually break your opponent, right? So he always had to run to the center, uh, wrestle from an advantage position, right? So in these principles, I didn't buy into that. You know, when in high school, I think I lost 4 times, and so when I got to Michigan State, I had my own way of doing things. But Tom's system, his principles, you know, you had to buy into that. So I remember the first time I wrestled in Iowa, and I'm wrestling a guy that I had beat before, but he's killing me, and I'm watching him run to the center. He didn't look tired. He created advantage positions. He did all the things that Tom said. And so I had to come back and say, well, his principles worked. The behaviors that he talked about, they work. So when I think about behaviors for the youth, what behaviors do you need, right? I go back 10 years ago. I was in Riyadh at an executive roundtable. And the questions are more important than answers, was cultural reform. This is 10 years ago. So here I am, an American, tackling this question. And I said, well, I gave the example of the traffic light, right? So I said, well, the traffic light here in Riyadh, well, you know, the idea of speeding, you may not stop. You know, how do you change an idea? But if you get enough tickets, the behavior will change before the idea. So tackling ideas are hard. There's ideas and ideologies that are in place from years ago. But if we can get the right behaviors, you can slowly change even the idea about speeding. Filter to action. Here, you know, I was thinking, again, I'm thinking of moments and principles to have this conversation with you. I took myself to a time in Michigan State. I was asked to go back and speak in a program for the Big Ten. It's called Athletes in Action. And so they would bring different student athletes back to speak. And so they brought me back, and my topic was room at the table. So imagine I'm speaking to student athletes. And one of the guys, as a American football player, he said, well, the question he asked me was, do you have to talk different in corporate America, our global world? So it caught me off guard. So I said, well, what sport do you play? He said, football. I said, well, do you start? He said, no, I'm a walk-on. And for everyone in the room, a walk-on is someone who doesn't have a scholarship. So I said, well, how do you get in the game? He said, well, I impress coach, I learn the plays, and I get a chance to start. So I said, well, imagine if you're at dinner and the conversations around golf, stocks and bonds, or another topic. If you can't contribute to the conversation, not in the game. So it's not talking a certain way, it's talking the standard. And in that standard, when I talk about filtering to action for the youth, I think it's important that we understand these standards, right? To give you another example, I once took some safety glasses and wrote age, race, religion, ethnicity. And the thing that as I was doing a speech, I was trying to get the people to see that we see these things, and these things allow us to filter to a perception. I see someone's age, I see their race, I see ethnicity. Oh, it's this. Well, for the youth, I think to embrace this challenge, this problem statement of shaping tomorrow, how are you filtering? What information are you using, and what conclusions are you arriving at to take on this problem statement? The root versus the fruit. Root of the matter. Oh, sorry. Here, again, I'm thinking about times in my life, and I thought about an interesting story about a guy. He has this huge company, and he's hearing all these issues with his elevators. He's thinking, well, what do I do? The people say the elevators are too slow. He invested, made them faster. They're not big enough, all these issues, and it's going on and on and on. And so the guy calls the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist says, oh, just go and put mirrors. Put mirrors. And so he said, oh, mirrors, okay, whatever. So he goes and he installs mirrors. Well, after a few weeks, the complaint stopped. So he goes back to the psychiatrist. Well, what happened? Why no one's complaining anymore? And the psychiatrist said, well, what problem were you trying to solve? He put the mirrors, and it gave him something to do. The elevators are never going to be fast enough. They were never going to be big enough. And so when I say the root of matters, I think the question to the youth, right, is what problems are you trying to solve? Because if I solve the root of an issue versus the fruit, then I can maybe really solve something. Take action. Here again, as I'm thinking about my life when it was important to take action, I think this is an immediate call to action for the youth, right? And that call is like a rally call that, you know, when we wrestled, we had certain things that we would say, and everyone would get up and move. So for you guys in this vast opportunity in space, how do you take action? I think you take action, you root it in a couple things, and it almost becomes jargon, right? And so for me, when I was thinking about something that would really be a fundamental difference for you guys is not having boundaries, right? To think bodacious, right? So, and I'll come back to take action. And lastly, the spirit and intent. If I jump to my professional world and I'm dealing with contracts, we move by the intent, but the spirit creates a whole different thing. I think about suppliers who will do a lot more than the contract says in the spirit, but the intent says this. I think about, I was on a call with a CEO the other day and we were talking about sales strategies, and we were actually talking about a time during COVID where the KPIs were for the sales to have so many client meetings. And at that time, it wasn't really efficient to really travel. But the KPI means you go and you travel. Well, you're probably not going to meet a decision maker, and you're actually costing the company money. So here, the intent was driving the wrong outcome. The intent was to meet the client, but no, that's actually causing more cost to the company. So as I walk it back to the youth, between the spirit and the intent, how are you going to move to shape tomorrow? So now it gets interesting. If we take these principles and to have this principle-based conversation on shaping tomorrow, then I could say there's a couple of things that you're going to need to think about. One are building blocks. You know, building blocks are the things that allow you to take an idea, change it, direct it, come on top of it. Someone says we should do this. Do I build on top of it, around it, beneath it? A building block. The discovery block, from at least applying principle-based logic, allows me to take something further. Now, in between that, I then have a problem statement. In business, you always get problem statements. Do you call them a problem statement? Well, I'm calling this out as a problem statement, shaping tomorrow's future. For me, that problem statement requires a point of view. That point of view, that's the challenge. That's the challenge to embrace for the youth. And that challenge, if I walk it back to these principles, what behaviors are you going to show and demonstrate in that challenge with that point of view? How will you filter? You know, how are you going to get the perception to go after some of these opportunities? What roots of matters? What are the real problem statements that you'll address in shaping tomorrow? If we take action, what actions are you going to take? Right? If I'm thinking about solution-based action, or am I thinking about a resolution? And lastly, to spirit intent. I think this is the essence of what the youth need to think about. Between that spirit of energy, you know, if I had to have a formula, I would say passion plus courage divided by higher efficiency times momentum. I mean, that type of mindset, that's excellence everywhere. So how do we take these principles and start to shape and think about points of view? And in doing that, I think you come to this interesting pivotal point, which I'm saying is challenge logic. Challenging logic. Logic is a product of yesterday's wisdom. So for the youth to shape this future, you're going to have to coordinate, collaborate with today's leaders. Right? The wisdom of today. You don't just abandon that. And if I come back to an example of earlier about size, you know, where you sit in the organization is not doesn't have to define you. We define ourselves, right? I think about, again, for me, when I was in Shell, I would look out in our global atlas and find different executives around the world and send them an email and say, can I talk to you for 5 minutes? Every organization that I've been in, I've done that. Some of the cultures and organizations, they don't like it. They think, oh, you're stepping over the chain of command. But again, between spirit and intent, my intent is to learn new organization. So I guess as I'm coming back around, I'm giving you examples. This problem statement that you're facing, the point of views, the POVs that you're going to apply to them, and I think collective wisdom that you apply is going to be important. If I come to the reflections, we talked about behaviors. We talked about understanding the ideas that maybe at your level in the organization you can't do this, or an idea that you have to go through this channel, which are fine. And maybe to change that idea, that belief that's put upon this youth movement is difficult, but you start to whittle away at that idea by tackling behaviors, showing resilience, showing commitment, showing determination. The importance of perspective. Here, I think we talked about that a few minutes ago, but I'll even give you another funny story. I was doing a book review for a buddy, a culinary guy, and we were talking about fruit and food. And so basically we said, well, imagine if I blindfold you and I put an apple, an orange, and a piece of fruit you've never saw before, touched or taste. So I say, well, touch this one. You say, it's an apple. Well, taste this one. You say, it's an orange. I say, well, touch this one. You say, well, it feels like an apple. Or it tastes like an orange. Well, that third piece of fruit you've never touched or tasted, but you took a perspective and you applied it to something you knew when it was really a pear. So I think the point here is to gain perspective, is to understand there's new things to learn. You won't say it's an apple or orange. You'll say, I don't know. And then next time you'll say it's a pear. I think for the youth, embracing this and this problem statement of challenging tomorrow is going to be important for you. Identifying the roots. Again, what problem are you going to try to solve? Don't procrastinate. Here I put this, and I wanted to, I always joke with Dima for GPCA about this. My grandparents adopted kids, and so we would have dinner together, and my grandmother would never join us for the dinner. She would always wait till we were done. And so she would fix things that some of us didn't like. But for me, I would always eat the thing I didn't like the most first. I didn't want it to get cold. And I would watch my cousins and other people that she would come by and throw the food away because they wouldn't eat it. They didn't like it in the beginning, and now it's cold. And so to me, when I think about the dinner table and some of the experiences, when I say don't procrastinate, I learned that with food. Taking the toughest thing, getting it off your plate. And to this day, when I think about some other family members, they still procrastinate. So I think one of the challenges, again, when I take these principles over for you, is not to procrastinate, to embrace this opportunity that's facing you. Understand which ones are moving you, spirit and intent. We talked a little bit about that, but I would definitely carry that forward with this problem statement. So, and maybe kind of wrapping this down, you have to do something. I think as I come out of kind of all that principled logic, it means what? Do something. Do something, because if you were faced with two options of doing nothing, would you rather have bankruptcy of purse or bankruptcy of life? Well, you probably wouldn't want either. But I think the message here that I have is to do something. And then lastly, I think your interest is in the future, right? And that's where you're going to spend the rest of your life. So I want to thank you guys. I think we're wrapping down, so I'm open to questions.